Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. This is the place where you get to call in and talk to two trans people about all of your questions, anything and everything trans-related. So if you are an ally or an enemy, I suppose, however you want to frame that, we're willing to talk to you and have a conversation. I am your host today, Arden Hart, and with me is return guest, of course, the lovely, always, Nominal Naomi. How you doing?
Hello, doing great. Glad to be back. Always a pleasure to be a friend of the show.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you. I know chat loves you, and we love you. So before we kind of get into things, why don't you just do, of course, a little plug about you and what you do and all your stuff.
Yeah, sometimes I do streams on Twitch and post segments over to YouTube. I'm Nominal Naomi. I do a lot of trans rights related content and some other leftist politics kind of stuff. Haven't been streaming a lot lately, but it's always good to be here, and feel free to check out my videos, and hopefully we'll get back to streaming again some more soon.
Yeah. Naomi's doing the right thing, and as we're in an election year, touching grass to,
Touching grass, spending time with my new family, all that stuff.
Yeah, the important stuff to keep your sanity amidst all of this. So, the number, if you want to call in, is 720-619-2288. We do have some lines open. We are having troubles with the web caller today, so that can be a problem if you're an international caller. Definitely keep trying, but I know we've had repeated issues over the last month with, like, audio issues, so, yeah, just keep that in mind. You might have to try to call in multiple times and do, like, some tests with our screener before you get on. But we would love to talk to you as long as the system's working. Technical problems aside, let's get into our poll. So every week we do polls here on Transatlantic just to kind of cover either current events or even just general trans-related topics to give you guys maybe something to call in about or spark conversation in chat. So last week's poll was, do you support restricting Medicaid coverage of evidence-based gender-affirming care for adults? Now, this is worded in a particular way, obviously, but I'm glad to see that 90% said no and 10% said yes out of 8.8 thousand votes. There was also a pinned comment from me on this one saying, basically, if you're saying yes, why? And if it's something to the effect of, like, I don't want my tax dollars going to this, what is different about gender-affirming care to you that you would not want your tax dollars going to that specifically versus, like, anything else in the medical industry? There's lots of people who need medical care due to, I'm not even saying being trans is a choice, but due to choices they've made, and we still have to pay for their medical care just the same as we do everything else. And so, like, what is unique about trans care here that would make it a problem? And to be honest, I read through most of the responses and I didn't really see anything other than either accusations that gender-affirming care wasn't evidence-based or supported by major medical organizations. I also saw claims that it was, like, kind of all elective and that therefore they don't want their tax dollars going to that. I also saw some weird kind of comments of people who just seem to be totally missing the point, saying things about, like, obesity and how they wouldn't want to have to pay for that. And it's like, but you do. And also, I hope you realize that the obese person who's on Medicare also pays their taxes to fund your health care. Whenever you need things, their tax dollars are going to help you too. It is that's how taxes work. We all put a little bit of money into the pot so that we can have a greater benefit for those who need it. But
Sounds like we had some insurance companies in the replies.
Yeah, right. It almost sounds like, there's some reps there trying to do defense. But I don't know, Naomi, if you heard about this or if you have any thoughts on kind of, like, the Medicare system or anything like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, people can get, like, kind of picky when it comes to things that don't affect them personally. But if we assess, like, medicine broadly, there's so many things related to mental health, related to, just, like, lifestyle choices that have accumulated over time that, like, if we want to live in a healthy society and promote the public health, like, it's good to take care of all of these things. And so, yeah, I think that everybody should be getting treatment for stuff that's going to help them.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think of, like, a point that we were talking about last week where it's, oh, and I lost it. Man, ADHD has me. Man, I was gonna riff and it was
There it
off of
goes.
something I said last week, but that's okay. So yeah, if you missed out your opportunity to talk to or to join the conversation on that poll, that's okay because we do have a poll this week. This poll is a little bit more general and maybe a bit of a softball, but that's okay. So this week's poll is: do you think that you need to understand trans people's identities to believe that we have a right to exist free from discrimination? I think this one's pretty straightforward. I don't think there's a lot of context I got to give you on this one. This is just kind of in response to something we get a lot on this show where people will call in and say, oh, I logically support trans people, but I just don't get it, kind of that line of thinking. And the question is do you need to? I don't get lots of aspects about other people's personal identities, but I don't really need to know that I, as a freedom-loving American, really support their right to be themselves and to have access to housing and job security without discrimination. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to give any thoughts on that, Naomi. It's not too much of a deep
Absolutely.
question.
I think that everybody wants to be understood, but at some level, having this free American society, like you say, it's about being able to respect that people are very different and there's lots of different ways that people want to live their lives. And I don't have to understand why, say, a super conservative religious person wants to live their life like that. Sounds crazy to me, but I respect their right to do that. And I hope they respect my right likewise.
Yeah. No need to dawdle on that one too much. We have a couple callers on the line, but there are open spots. We're just going to dive into calls and have a long caller show. Sometimes we go 15, 20 minutes into talking about the polls, but I like sometimes when we kind of can just dive right into it. So again, that number is 720-619-2288. If you would like to call in, please do that. We'd be happy to talk to you, but let's just dive right in first. We have Victor in the Netherlands. Pronouns are he, him. Victor, you are live on the line. Tell me what's going on.
Hi, thank you for having me here. Am I audible?
Yep, we hear
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. I'm calling here because I need to understand a couple of topics about transgenderism, and I'm quite lost. It has been quite close to me in the last couple of weeks, and I reached a point where I have no idea what to do. So maybe we can, maybe you guys can help me understand a couple of things. I'll try to be as clear as possible. But if I say something wrong, I'm more than open to get corrected here. So I know someone very close to me that is a preteen that has been through a very unfortunate event that happened a couple of years ago and is now transitioning. And the reason why I clarify this is because I understand that, as far as I understand, transgenderism is something that is biological, that you're born like that. But I have heard also cases, mostly online, of people that were that went through some traumatizing event that ended up transitioning. And I don't know if that's also, if there's some biological factor there that might be, maybe directing that person to transition. So maybe I would like to open this call by asking if it's correct to differentiate between both cases.
So for clarity, you're asking, is it good to differentiate between a trans person who transitions out of a biological, innate disposition versus maybe in response to events in their life?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so I think it's important to note that when we're talking about trans people who have been through significant trauma, there is a tendency to view it in a certain direction, where it is the trauma has influenced their trans identity, when, in fact, in many cases, it can be the case that evidence of this person's, identity actually showed up early, and that made them a target for victimization. Is a really common mistake that a lot of people make, just to only view it in the direction that you sort of framed it here. And I think it's important to note that it could be either way. And I'm not saying that in this individual that you're referring to, that it may in fact be that they were traumatized and then came to be aware of their trans identity. But lots of people are traumatized, and it doesn't exclude you from being a trans person. It doesn't exclude you from having had some sort of innate biological predisposition to being trans. But even if we were to just like grant all of that, right, and say, okay, this person is transitioning because they were traumatized. If this leads to them under like having a like better quality of life and feeling happier in their skin, to be completely honest, whether or not being trans is in fact like ontologically like a state of being or something that you have to like be born with, I don't know if I really care, because I could never have access to that person's mind to know which of those two trans people they are. And so if their life is better for it, I don't know why it really matters what caused them to be trans, if that makes sense. But Naomi, did you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I think that like if we're going to talk about like say a trans person and whether or not their desire to transition is related to a trauma response, I think that should really only matter between that person and their mental health care team, like a therapist or psychiatrist. Ultimately, it'd be the job of that psychiatrist to help this person, work through potential trauma, recognize like where their desire to transition is coming from, and if it's something that would benefit them. And this is going to exist on kind of a case-by-case basis, but I don't think that broadly, categorically, it's that important to distinguish between these two things, because that's more of like a private kind of like mental health thing that, it may influence what they are looking for in life. It may not. It's really going to depend, and I think that their therapist or psychiatrist can be the best person to handle that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's a great answer, both of you. Thank you so much for that. I was also not implying that was specifically the case. I'm trying to understand how, actually, if it was actually possible that someone that is not trans or even predisposed to be trans throughout their lives to end up in that direction without any kind of biological maybe predisposition. But I do agree with you that whatever helps them go through life in the best and live the best life that they can. I would like to open a new door, if it's okay, related to this same topic, which is that you mentioned therapy, either therapist or psychiatrist. I've been looking online quite a lot about this, and like, to be honest, I've seen therapists that are openly treating transgenderism as a mental illness or a problem that you need to fix, and at the same time you have the other opposite, the other extreme of therapists that are extremely open and extremely welcome. And I feel that if I try to go myself out there and find a therapist for this person, I don't know what I'm going to find. And I don't know if there's any sort of database online of therapists or psychiatrists that specialize in this topic, that it's way easier to contact, and start from there, maybe.
Well, I don't know if it's exactly the same in the Netherlands. I know in the US, a lot of the databases that we have to help you find a therapist, like Psychology Today and things like that, you can usually filter for an LGBT specialization. But there's also a problem where I think to earn a like specialization in different states, they have different rules. So like for some, it could be, I think, as simple as like, that's just like a particular clientele that you had a lot while you were in grad school. And so you can sort of claim a specialization, or even some of them having like certain requirements you need to meet to earn that specialization. So I think it varies a little bit. I will say that with your concern to like, I think it's interesting how you kind of positioned the two, as you put it, extremes of, people who are essentially conversion therapists who are trying to beat the transness out of you versus people who are affirming as sort of an extreme. But I'm not particularly sure that I view that as an equal distinction. I'm also not exactly familiar with what the evidence suggests is the best therapeutic approach. I don't know that it would differ significantly from the therapeutic approaches that we use for any other thing that people go to therapy for, which is often, it's good to challenge the things that make you discomfort. I know those exposure therapies have a lot of evidence, but also like CBT has a lot of strength in like helping you sort out like, what decisions or behaviors are being influenced by like traumatic emotions versus what are like, maybe your authentic like logical like desires and conclusions that you're trying to reach now in like your present day. But yeah, I don't know, Naomi, I know you're a data girl. You got some info on this?
Yeah, so the affirmative model...
Naomi. I'm
yeah,
the affirmative model... You said CBT. I'm not sure what that stands for.
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay,
it's a modality of treatment. Yeah. Go ahead, Naomi.
Yeah, so the big idea behind the affirmative model, which is what's shown in the data to be the most effective model at helping people that are experiencing gender dysphoria, is if you're going to like approach a therapist with a problem, what the therapist is going to first do is they're going to affirm your feeling, affirm that you're feeling something that you bring to them. So like, say you come to a therapist, you're like, I'm feeling depressed. They're like, oh, that sucks. Like, why are you feeling that way? And so similarly, if somebody comes to a therapist and they're like, hey, I think I might be trans, the correct response is to affirm that, be like, okay, that's cool. Let's explore that. Like, what's going on there? So you affirm the initial feeling, and then you kind of investigate and explore further. And that's how therapy will broadly approach these topics in a way, because the problem is like, if you're trying to just like convert somebody out of their trans identity or just like shut down any kind of discussion of trans identity, that's going to make somebody extremely defensive and just unable to make any kind of progress. Like conversion therapy just doesn't work. It's not an effective way of reaching out to people, in addition to like the harmful effects that it has on people. And then in addition to the affirmative model, what was I going to say? There was one other bit. The idea of like, are we trying to treat this as some kind of like mental illness? Broadly speaking, in like a therapeutic or a medical context, something would be a mental illness or like a medical condition if it causes clinically significant distress or disability. So the idea is if your gender dysphoria is reaching a point where it's like, debilitating, distressing, then a therapist is going to help you, work through that, work out of that. Similarly, they would treat other like mental health conditions. But if you were to approach a therapist and your gender isn't something that's distressing, it's not something that's debilitating, then they can just affirm that and everything seems to be pretty well in the data.
Yeah, that sounds like a good therapist, right? Which is what I'm hoping to find.
Absolutely.
I think most therapists are going to end up in that range, Victor. I mean, even the therapists who don't specialize in LGBT stuff, in my experience, like Naomi's saying, if you come to them saying I'm depressed, usually their first response isn't going to be like, well, are you really depressed? Like, let me challenge that and like make sure you are definitely depressed. It's usually, like Naomi said, to validate it first. And so I think, I don't know, I'm suspecting that the Netherlands is going to have relatively similar guidelines and expectations for people to become licensed to provide like clinical therapy. So I imagine that anyone you get is probably going to be pretty well equipped to help your friend or this person navigate this as good as possible, as well as possible. But yeah, I don't think you have. What I hear in your voice is something that I hear from a lot of people, which is kind of this like default assumption that if they are validated, that like that's a problem, maybe like they went to validation first. But like I definitely think you should just trust that the specialist knows how to do their specialist job better than you do. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, I think you're good on the spot there. Yeah, you got me there. So if you were in my situation, for example, you would just maybe Google and start finding whatever therapist you have in your area and maybe go for it, and that's it. That would be step one for you. What do you think?
Yeah. So you said this person was a preteen, right?
Yeah.
So something I've said before on this show, and that I had a detransition, retransition experience. And some stuff that I learned from that is that I think I understand the instinct to want to be really sure when a young person is trans that they're like actually trans, because I think there's a lot of reasonable fear that, you know, if they regret this, that it could be like really difficult for them down the line. And that's not a completely, I think that's coming from a loving place. Even if maybe its effect isn't quite so good on the individual. But I think the important thing to know is that, like, if you come at this challenging this person, I think what they're going to internalize is that when they have a struggle, a difficult feeling or something that they're struggling with, that you're going to challenge them and you're not going to like be an open place where they can go to express those feelings. If it really is the case that this person's trans experience is just a phase, I think the best thing you can do is to say, I love you. I want you to be happy, and I want you to be exactly who you are. And if that means you're trans, then I'll validate that. And if in 3 years you tell me, actually, I think that was a mistake, I don't think I'm trans, then I'll be there for that too. I'll be there for whatever you think is best for you. I think you're going to have a more trusting bond with this individual, where if it is in fact a phase, they can tell you that sooner and they can work through those emotions faster by starting from that place rather than constantly challenging them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you can always offer, like, yeah, I'm always here to help or give support if you need it. Like, you can always talk to me. And that would be the safest space for them to talk to you about those kind of, like, feelings if they are having any kind of, like, doubts.
Yeah, great answer. Yeah, I'll take it. Thank you so much.
All right, best of luck, Victor, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. All right. Thank you, Victor, for that first call. If you are listening to me in the queue, we're going to be getting to you shortly. I do have a job to do here. I have to announce the next week of shows coming up on the line. Let me pull this up so I can actually get this right. This Sunday on the Sunday Show at 2 p.m. Central Time will be Matt and Jimmy on the Sunday Show. 6 p.m. on Skep Talk on Monday, it will be Erika Guts Gibbon hosting. I don't know if we have confirmed her guest yet, but it's definitely going to be Erika's episode. Tuesday's episode of Chewed Gum will be back with the OG team, Eve and Alyssa. Being on Chewed Gum was so much fun this week. I love getting to talk about, like, purity culture and sex in that way. I think it's a really interesting conversation, especially coming from the, like, you know, we talk a lot about, like, the harms of religion, and I think it is an interesting thing how ubiquitously people in America, even who didn't grow up in, like, super fervently religious households, still internalize a lot of that same messaging and carry a lot of the shame around sexuality. So I love the work they're doing there. I think that's going to be great. Next Wednesday, we have on The Hang Up, it'll be Matt joined by Jimmy again. We're getting a lot of Jimmy. It's getting close to political season, so I think you're going to see them together a lot. Then next week's Hang Up is going to be at 5 p.m., not 2 p.m., because we're going to have Dr. Ben back. So if you would like to see Dr. Ben, you should call in next week. But with that, we have some more callers. Let's talk to Drick in the UK. Pronouns are he, him. Drick, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Hello.
Are you there? Yeah, we do have a note of possible audio issues because Drick is calling in on the web caller from the UK. I'm really sorry that this is happening, everybody. I don't know what's changed recently about the web caller that's resulting in so many audio issues. I'm going to return you to the queue, Drick. Test all of your equipment, like unplug your headset, plug it back in, maybe hang up and call back. We'll do our best to get to you after that gets sorted. But for now, we're going to talk to Joshua. Pronouns are he, him, in Louisiana. Joshua, you are live on the line. Are you there?
Yes, Arden. Hi.
Awesome. What's going on?
Woo.
So I am the father of a 4-year-old girl, and sorry if it's windy. Just a second. I'm trying to get more something to me. I'm walking, not driving. I know that's a rule.
Okay. What's going on?
So it's made me, as a lot of girl dads say, you become very aware of the level of sexism and I don't know, just how much stuff can come up that just doesn't matter. And people will bring up the physical sex and outward gender of your child. And as somebody who's trying to be aware and be supportive of helping create a future world that is more inclusive, I have a lot of questions about what would be the best thing to do. Like in a simple way, should more people who are who don't care, like I listed as he, him, but would it be a bigger statement for more men and women who are cisgendered to just become openly non-binary and say, let's all just be called they, them, and move forward with that as a society? I don't mean to, I don't know. Let's just move forward with that as the question.
So you're basically asking us, how do we abolish gender? That's a big one.
Is that, well, so I do see in some ways how that could be both a positive and a negative, and I don't want to be oblivious to that, but it seems like conversation-wise, that is the most extreme and clear question I can ask.
Yeah. So I feel like I've changed on this a lot over even the course of TACUS existing, like 3 years or so. I think that my position on pronouns, at least as far as that interplays into your question, to like quickly address that, is that I think the only reason you should change your pronouns is if you want to. If that's for political reasons, then that can be your reason. I'm not here to police like why you want to change your pronouns. But I don't know if you should feel like obligated to change your pronouns like for like the purpose of a statement. I think I don't know if that necessarily accomplishes the intended goal, but I don't necessarily know if it's like a hindrance to the goal either. But yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and I do think that, you know, if we want to like reduce the impact of sexism, that gender abolition is a good goal to like start working towards. But I kind of view gender abolitionism personally much in the way that I view like socialism, where I think it is a really good guiding post for like the kind of future that I would like to see, but I'm not thoroughly convinced that it is like actually attainable within the systems that we exist currently. And so I think it's a good thing to like influence your behavior, but I don't know that I have strong feelings about like what the correct way to attain it is. I think that's still really heavily disputed. I mean, we're talking about very like theoretical, philosophical territory, not like it's not something where we can like as opposed to socialism, where we can actually go like, oh, hey, these policies influence people's lives in this positive way. Gender abolitionism, I don't know if it has the same like empirical footing, but maybe I'm wrong. Naomi, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that probably like gender abolitionism often comes to people as like, oh, this sounds really awesome, I would love to do that. But then when it comes to like, how do we actually like practically implement it? That's when things get a lot harder. And so in like a policy front, you know, I think that voting for people who are going to have better policies on like gender equality, trans rights, etc., that's definitely going to bring us closer to a world where gender abolition is possible. But then just broadly speaking, I think that it's good on an interpersonal level to be cognizant of how like gender is influencing the interactions you have with people and how you can teach like a better framework to your children. Like, you know, there's so much like implicit messaging that you'll even just catch yourself doing to your own kids without without realizing it in the moment, because it's like it becomes very like natural with all the messages we've internalized throughout our life to just replicate those with even our own kids. But you can also set out like intentional frameworks to help kids kind of explore that a bit, or be like, you know, giving them different options for ways they want to express gender, letting them lead, like, you know, what kind of color do you want this shirt to be, for example? Things as simple as that. They might already have like gendered ideas forming around there that you can help them challenge and kind of break down. Like, oh yeah, you know, boys can wear a pink shirt too if they want, or whatever. Like there's a lot that you can do at an interpersonal level, and I think a lot of it starts with like trying to be aware of these implicit messages that you've internalized and that you reflect unknowingly, and that's an ongoing process.
How does that all land with you, Joshua?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I knew the way I phrased it was most extreme, but would get the most, be the best conversation starter. On a personal level, yes, any of the things you've talked about, we've tried to, or both of you talked about, we, my wife and I have both tried to be aware of, and some of them I bring up, say it's walking up to a park and saying, you know, who are they? Go play with them. You know, about a kid that from a distance I don't know how they want to be referred to. And even thinking about that, like not assuming, trying to teach her to not assume even passively or just in general, just not assume how you're going to refer to other people. And that's something we've been aware of. Color is a big thing because my wife's favorite color is actually blue, which ended up semi-pushed on my daughter, but then even just being aware, like, that she leaned towards blue and purple and brown and black are the 4 colors that were like, if you let her pick, and those were in the mix, depending on the week, those were the ones she was going to pick. And witnessing events where we would go to do like a kid's craft at a farmer's market, and the person doing the craft booth, when she walked up as a little blonde girl, would immediately go, ooh, here's hot pink. You want this one? And I love that we've taught her that she can say what she wants. She has looked people in the eye and be like, no, I want the blue one. And not even realize how much she just put off this adult. But there are other things that, yes, she is being raised as a girl, as a gendered female, and doing cutesy things with bows and skirts and dresses. And my wife's having fun with that. And yet I also, that's where I'm questioning, like, how much of that is a positive, a negative? Should we view it as like, okay, sure, like it shouldn't really matter, but it does in perception. That's where I'm really grappling with, like, I don't want to strip away the fun of life, right?
Yeah, I mean, if she likes it, I'd say that's absolutely a positive.
Yeah. I think this is kind of the problem that we're getting at with, like, the difficulty of gender abolitionism as, like, a practical matter. Like, I'm fully on board with you that I would like to reduce the impact of sexism on the world that your daughter is entering, for sure. And I think all the things we've said here are really great, but it's also a bit of a impossibility in, at least like in like American culture right now. I see you're in Louisiana. I'm sure you're in a particularly conservative state. You know, I think she's going to be surrounded by gender roles maybe more than she would be even if she was growing up in like New England or something, right? So it's kind of an impossibility, and I don't think you have to completely force her to be like a non-binary kid. I think you should let her find her own path and decide the things she likes, and if that's pink with bows and dresses, then great. And if that's stuff with blue and trucks and mud, then that's great too. Like, you know, just kind of letting her be whoever she wants to be and do the things that she likes. That's really the most you can do. All of these changes, the way we get to like a gender abolished society, are slow changes from, you know, generation to generation. If you've ever read Gender Trouble by why is their name escaping me? Judith Butler. Yes. They talk about reification and how, like, the way that gender gets really imposed on us is by seeing like how our parents do things and how we kind of internalize that and then recreate those roles, but maybe modify them to what extent we want for ourselves. And that's how you get these slow changes of progression from generation to generation. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's a good aspiration to have, and I think you have a good heart for like where you're coming at for your daughter's future. But I don't think you should be too hard on yourself if you're like using she, her pronouns for your daughter and letting her wear a dress. Like, if that's what she likes, then, you know, it's not a big deal. You're not responsible for all of the sexism that she'll incur in her life because you let her wear a dress, if that makes sense. Ooh, you still there?
I mean, I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I'm still here. I just was processing the way you said that last sentence.
No worries.
Okay. Yeah. other random note that goes along with what I said, but today's opening day for baseball, and there's no women's baseball. And that's a thing that just the little things that you really don't see. Like when you say, like, yeah, she can decide, just realizing how much, though, it is how you're socialized, right? So, like, if with my son, who is 6 months old, if he, if we leave his hair long, I mean, like, I will be as blunt as to say we did not pierce my daughter's ears and we didn't circumcise my son because I'm not going to cut on my child in a way that's not medically necessary and does gender them or does mutilate them in a way that's not necessary. And both of those have been questioned by our broader families. I've not been super blunt. We've been like, no, we're not going to circumcise. It's not necessary. And we're asked about piercing my daughter's ears. I'm like, we're not going to do that. And I kind of just left it there with my sister. Who tried to have this broader discussion about, well, but it'll hurt her in the future if she wants to do it. And I was like, yeah, but then, I could have this whole discussion about, like, bodily autonomy. And if she wants to, that's great. And if he wants to, that's great. But assuming that girls need pierced ears and boys don't, and I need to cut my son's foreskin off, are all things that are, like, currently terrible about our society. Like, I don't, like, that, I don't know. I mean, we could go down that road if you have time, but I don't know why so many people are just unaware, even on a personal level, when they jump into being a parent, of these decisions that they make. And it's just, that's the stuff that baffles me. There are no dolls in my house except for ones that we've randomly caught at parades. Because as much as you talk about, I'm in Louisiana, I'm in the New Orleans metro area. So I have a weird mix of what she's going to be exposed to. I mean, when she was 2, we went to the big gay Easter celebration parade. So she will definitely have a broader level of things she's exposed to in a positive context than if we were out in rural Louisiana. But it still is the Bible Belt. But yeah, I just feel like tons of people, for as much as there's tons of change that is happening, people don't think about things and they make decisions about their kids and they raise them in ways to stunt their growth mentally and don't even see it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit of, maybe it's the wrong mental hurdle that I'm thinking of, but there's almost like a bit of a survivorship bias going on for a lot of these people, right? Where they're like, oh, well, I was socialized that way. I was spanked. I had my ears pierced and I turned out okay. I actually really like that my ears are pierced. Therefore, it must be okay that we are doing this to the next generation too. And that, it should be like an expectation of some sort. Maybe, I don't really understand. Maybe there's an argument for it's really difficult to get circumcised later in life, but I didn't understand how that could apply to getting your ears pierced, because I don't think the age at which you get your ears pierced has any difference of like the efficacy of it healing well or anything like that. So that's crazy. But yeah, I mean, I think people just really look at their life, and if they think they turned out okay or they're happy with their life, they just assume that there must be like the way they were raised is totally without problem. And not everyone does that, but you do see it a lot.
It's like you have to make an intentional effort to be like critical of the way you were raised, the messaging you've internalized throughout your entire life. And I think it's really, really like heartening to see and promising that like you're doing these steps. And when talking to your family members, I think the key part of their response was like, well, but like, what if she wants to have her ears pierced later? Like, yeah, what if? There's a big if in there. What if she doesn't? Like, because it's uncertain, like you want to let her choose her own path. And I think that's awesome. And yeah. Sounds like you're doing a great job, and I wish you the best on that, because these all sound like really good steps. And yeah, I think that encouraging that kind of like consciousness about like the messaging we receive and whether or not we want to live like that or we want to choose a different path is a good thing, both for parents and kids to learn.
Yeah, if you're looking for us to like assuage your anxieties about like your parenting, Joshua, it sounds like you're already kind of going above and beyond what like 90% of people do for their kids at, trying to break the cycle and do better for the next generation. So I really don't think you have too much to worry about. I think you're doing about as much as you can be asked to do. But yeah, I mean, it is an unfortunate reality that, as you put it, there's no women's baseball team, there's the softball team, and those kind of distinctions are just all over the place in our society. And it's going to probably be a long time, probably long after any of us on this call fade from the memories of living people that, we're going to really see a truly egalitarian society, if ever. But I think all that you can do is what you're already doing, is just challenging those things.
Well, thank you both for that. I think I've taken up enough time on the show today. I'm glad I got through to talk to you. And, I'm going to keep listening and trying to learn how to be the best parent I can. And hopefully we can all make more change in the world, both for gender and religious affiliations and everything else.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, best of luck, Joshua. Thanks for calling in. I really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye. Alrighty. We have got a couple more callers on the line and still some open lines. So lines aren't packed. It's so weird to me. Sometimes randomly on a week we'll have like all the lines packed and like 20 busy signals out, and then sometimes it'll just be a slower week. But okay, let's talk to Violet. Pronouns are they, she in Canada. Violet has a question for us. This is kind of interesting. Violet, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Yeah, big fan of both of you two.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. What do you want to talk
about? So obviously I'm someone with autism, and to clarify before I say this question, I do not believe that being autistic and being LGBTQI+ is inherently the same thing, or that they are one and the same. However, realistically, there is a large amount of overlap between the LGBTQI+ community and people with various forms of neurodiversity, not just autism, but also schizophrenia and a few other disorders. I would also argue that some of the symptoms of being LGBTQI+, while in theory isn't inherently a disability, could be seen as disabling, or at least persistent multiple barriers in Canadian legalese speak. And as a result of that, should we then consider it to be a form of neurodiversity for the sake of gaining disability accommodation? With the reasoning being that if someone is dealing with being ace, for example, there might be a lot of social expectations, or if someone's aromantic, especially if someone's expected to be performing romantic or sexual behavior in a social setting and they are not able to do that or don't know how to do that, that can be disabling. And I would argue that if a list can be considered socially disabling, then, I would argue that a lot of the discrimination that occurs as a result of being LGBTQI+ could be seen as, at the very least, a barrier, if not necessarily formally a disability. So I'm curious what you two think, and if it would even be important to give that label to LGBTQI+ as opposed to just some people that are LGBTQI+ also have disabilities or have barriers, and we should address it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I think that the question you're getting at really hinges on this idea of disability as a medical model versus disability as a social model. So under the medical model theory, we conceptualize disability as there's something wrong internally, maybe there's something went wrong in your brain chemistry, maybe there's something with your physical body that's either debilitating or causes difficulties. Meanwhile, the social model disability would recognize that a disability would be something that's caused by society not being prepared to meet the needs of people with certain conditions. So for example, we could even think of a physical disability under the social model. For example, being in a wheelchair is a problem because society doesn't have wheelchair ramps, wheelchair accessible places. Or similarly, a lot of these kind of if we're talking about the discrimination or disabling factors of queer identity, it'd be more society often doesn't understand queer identity. Society often isn't built for people like us. There's so many, you can talk about social exclusions or otherwise just not being recognized socially that impacts queer people's lives. And when it comes to legal and when it comes to legal kind of discrimination stuff, it's really hard to get the social model of disability like really back legally, because that would require us to actually care and change society a lot. But there's a lot that you can do on kind of like a policy level to make changes that are going to help people that are being disabled under this kind of like social model. And so I think that there's a lot of things you can do like at an institutional level, where institutions can strive to have, like resources for queer people, spaces, groups for queer people, as well as just like, government non-discrimination protections, other things like that. That's what I had to say on kind of like the disability models and how that kind of relates to this question. Did you have more to add, Arden?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so I have no problem with the notion that there is a bit of this like social disability model wherein society is not constructing itself to accommodate people effectively who might differ from normative presentations of like how humans are. I do think though there seems to be a distinction that I can notice, at least when it comes to somebody who, for example, is in a wheelchair or something. I think that person seems to me to both fall into a medical and a social disability model quite comfortably. And the difference is when it comes to being LGBT, I don't know that we could fall into a medical model by that standard. I definitely think there's a strong case for a social model, because I think any queer person can tell you society is not built for us and that we face discrimination on the basis of being queer. But it seems to me like a little bit of a category error. Like, I don't know that, for example, you were asking about, like, should we get disability accommodations? And I could see there being some sort of socially funded government program that could, like, try to equip queer people with resources to sort of, create more equitable outcomes for queer and, like, cis heteronormative people. But to me, I would think that would fall more under like a reparations sort of thing rather than necessarily like disability accommodations, if that makes sense. And now, when we really get down to it at this, I'm not sure that it matters on like an individual personal level where you fall on, a social or medical disability model. If you need help, you need help. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I see there being a lot of hurdles if we try to include LGBT people under this sort of medical model, even if it's just purely from like a utilitarian approach, like just for the benefits that they would get, like it would be a good thing or something. I think it would be pretty difficult to accomplish that. I don't know. I also think there's going to be a lot of LGBT people who would, thoroughly rebuke being referred to as like a disabled person on the basis of their queer identity, because it's like, my queerness isn't disabling, it's exclusively society that is disabling me. But I also know lots of people who have physical disabilities who are like really advocating that it's okay to be, their whatever thing that they have is disabling their ability to like physically interact with the world in a normative sense. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I need to think on this a little bit more to have a take I'm super comfortable like standing behind, but I'm definitely noticing like issues with that approach that I feel like would be a problem. But I don't know. Maybe you can resolve those, Violet. What do you think to all of what was just said?
I think it makes sense. I think one twist that I'll bring in is the deaf community, because in the deaf community, there is to this day a strong debate on if it actually is disabling. And I would argue that if they're able to have some people receive disability benefits, knowing that some other people don't even believe that it's a disability, I believe that there is at least a precedent of you don't have to have the entire community to view it as a disability to recognize that for some people it's disabling. And I think like that's the important part. Like for me, I don't view my list as inherently disabling now, but it certainly was disabling in elementary school, where I was picked on repeatedly for years over something that to me just seems like just another way that people can be different. So I think it's definitely like it's one of those biological social overlaps a lot, because what we consider biologically disabled is socially constructed. What we consider to be a problem socially is like very much up for debate. Like if someone's short, for example, then some people view that as a disability. Other people view that as, well, they're short, so what? And what short means and where the line is between disabling amounts of shortness or disabling amounts of tallness, even in some circumstances, is completely subjective and not a biological reality. It's a social construct that we've decided that, well, this is the level of short you need to be considered disabled as an adult being short. And like, also, does that apply to adults? Does that apply to children? There's different standards on adults being short than children being short, for example. So I think, like, to me, like the gap between bio and social assumes that there's objectiveness in biology, but in reality, the biology-based disabilities are also socially constructed to me. They're just socially constructed based off of, well, how much of a disability does it need to be in order to cross the line into needing assistance, or how much assistance?
Sure. I still think I'm struggling with, so I'm not a part of the deaf community. I do have pretty severe hearing loss, and actually it is negatively affects my life in a pretty significant way, but I wouldn't claim to be deaf or a part of the deaf community, because just I grew up where people were like, it's fine, just go to school. I don't have any like cultural relation to like the deaf community, so I would feel weird to like claim partnership with that. But it does still seem to me, I agree with you that even like medical disabilities are socially constructed, in the sense that like you were saying, you know, you have to have a certain amount of hearing loss to qualify as a deaf or hard of hearing person and to receive public or like disability accommodations for that. But still, there is a physical difference from like a normative, because we're talking about normative, right? Not normal, but like normative, like what statistically averages. We're talking about a deviation from the statistical, like physical abilities of most humans, whereas, and like your literal ability to interact with the physical world versus something that is purely on the social. Yeah, I don't know that matters. I'm not saying that I think that necessarily you're wrong. I feel like I need to digest this for a while longer, because I don't know that I fully can get on board with how you're approaching it. But I also think I agree with your point that our current paradigm is maybe myopic to a certain extent, and that maybe a restructuring that would include programs that could help queer people as well as people who might have more of like a physical disability could be a better model to approach things with. Yeah, I definitely need to digest this more. I don't know, Naomi, if you have more thoughts on it, please go back.
Yeah, I think
I'm enjoying listening. Yeah.
It might be a bit of a resource allocation problem, where it's about finding the best way to like allocate resources for different kinds of needs, different kinds of, say, disabilities, different kinds of, say, like impacts that people are going to have related to society, related to, how their body works or has deficits in certain areas. And so, when it comes to something that might fall under like a medical model more cleanly, I can see how having access to like doctors, having like access to appointments, perhaps even having like a social worker is going to be like really impactful in those kind of cases. Whereas if we're talking about like, queer discrimination, then things like having broader social acceptance, having, like community, like bringing people together, that kind of stuff is going to have a lot more impact. And so there's going to be different ways that you would kind of target for different goals. But yeah, I think it's good to have kind of like this social and medical models in mind with how we approach things. And especially also recognizing how even medical conditions are socially constructed, so that we're not like over pathologizing people, and also that we're kind of like allocating resources where they're best used,
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely No, sorry. Go ahead, Violet. I want to hear what you have to say on this.
One thing I did want to respond was there's commenter Marky who mentioned that I'm saying that being queer is medicalized. I think it's important to understand when I say disability, that doesn't mean medical inherently. It can be political or governmental. Like in Canada, the line for it is persons with multiple barriers is considered equivalent to a person with a permanent disability, because effectively the same support systems are needed for both groups. But the line between disability is more just in how the criteria is written, as opposed to it being this is medical, this is not medical. So I think, like, to me, that model is interesting and something I'm still working through myself. Like, this is not something I have a strong opinion on myself either. I'm still thinking on this as well, as someone who recognizes that my autism has harmed me much more than being trans has. Like, the social stigmas that come with being autistic on top of the disabling aspects absolutely have been a bigger impact for me. But that's also partly like the place I was born, the place I was raised. All of that's obviously going to be subjective to me and my personal experience. And that's why I'm trying to take myself out of that and think, okay, well, hypothetically, I don't have autism, I don't have all these other disabilities, but like, I have a harder time going to a dating meetup because all of the dating meetups that exist in a small town, for example, might only be assuming that people are straight, and therefore I have to not only disclose my not straightness to that group, but also find someone else who's also willing to go to that meetup, who's also not straight, and potentially be the first person who pointed out like an issue with that group or meeting setup being inherently straight centric. Like, there are definitely, like, disabling might not even be the right word. There are definitely barriers. I would say barriers might be a better word here.
Yeah, I think that's kind of
inherent to those experiences.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you, but I think that's kind of where I'm getting hung up on, and it could just be a matter of the notion of disability is so heavily stigmatized, even for people who could arguably have like a permanent physical disability. But yeah, I don't know. I'm still definitely struggling necessarily with totally getting on board with this, but I don't necessarily know that. I think you've definitely started a train of thought that I haven't really gone down before, which I really like, and can explore more how maybe to refine talking about these issues. Otherwise, yeah, I like, I'm all for having better social nets, like for better social programs, and like, you know, having tax funded like social programs that can help people who are marginalized and not with physical disabilities. I don't object to any of that stuff. It's more of the categorization that it feels to me like there's going to be some other barriers there that I'm not seeing or not thinking about currently, that I just want to sit on for a while and think about. But I do appreciate you calling in and bringing this topic, because this is really interesting. I haven't actually, we do so many things on this show where I'm like, okay, here's another 20 shows in a row where I'm not talking about anything new. It's really nice to have like a new topic kind of enter my brain from this conversation. So
yeah, that was why I brought it up. It was like the first time I really thought about because recently a cousin of mine did say that, you know, they couldn't get disability status, but they could get persons with multiple barriers, because under the system, it's not considered a disability, but it is considered a barrier. Mm-hmm. And it did make me wonder, okay, so then what is the line, if there even is such a thing? Is it entirely a how you interact with the medical system versus the social system? And if so, is like the medical system itself inherently just dealing with social problems in the form of medicalizing the social problems? And like, yeah, it's back to the biopsychosocial model being very fuzzy, because there isn't clear lines usually when you're thinking about things in that model. So that's my hope, is that like definitely I can hear more opinions as I talk to other people about it and see what they think. But I'm open definitely to calling back another time, hopefully a little while from now, to give time to let it sit in discussing more, especially if Dr. Ben's available, because I'd love to hear what a doctor thinks on that, because obviously that's much more directly his line of experience.
Yeah, I think Dr. Ben is going to be on at least next week, possibly the next 2 weeks. So he'll definitely be around. Yeah, I feel like I need to go like watch some content and read a book or two on this, because now I'm like, okay, there's definitely aspects of my current paradigm that I think are maybe flawed that I'm seeing. But yeah, I appreciate the call to Violet. No, I think this is an interesting topic, and I hope to see it continue. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks. You too. Nice talking to both of you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Man, I'm going to be sitting on that one all day long. Good luck getting work done later. All right, so Drick from the UK, who we tried to talk to earlier, has reconnected. So let's see if his audio is sorted. Drick from the UK, pronouns are he, him. Please tell me. Yes, all right, we can hear you.
Hey.
Can you hear me? We good. We good. Nice. Sorry. Hi, girls. Can you hear me?
Yep. What's going on?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, just a question. We got some dating advice. I'm a cis guy, and I dated this trans girl some years ago, and thing is, it was going well. Met online and chatted for 2-3 months, and we went a couple of dates, and yeah, it was going well until she told me. She basically said, "Sorry, I don't know why I was nervous." Yeah, so she told me basically that she was going to go through bottom surgery, and I don't know why it kind of shook me. I don't know why it just made me feel a bit weird. And I didn't know how to handle that situation. I don't know why. I was a bit ignorant at the time. And yeah, so I just want to get your advice on that, basically, to see how I could have, better respond to that.
Well,
Hello?
my first, yeah, sorry. I think we're processing. I think my
Just kind of thinking a little bit.
Yeah,
when you say it like when it say it like shook you, like can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like how did that make you feel?
I don't know. It's just like it's hard to explain. It's because I knew what I was getting into first, right? It was like built into the traction was built. That was built in that she was pre-op. And so when she told me she was going to have the bottom surgery and stuff, I was like, okay. Yeah, I didn't know how to process it. It was just weird. I mean, I was still talking to her through the process and stuff. And when she did finally have it, I went to the hospital. I visited her a couple of times, and so we kept contact and stuff. But yeah, just the traction wasn't there as it used to be. And after that, it just kind of fizzled away. And I look back now, and then obviously I'm a bit more mature. But yeah, I didn't handle that situation well at all. So I don't know why. I don't know why it just showed me. I don't know if you have experience, you guys.
So,
I don't know. You've spoken to my experience the same.
I think the obvious question that comes to mind is, were you particularly interested in her penis?
I mean, it was built into the attraction for sure. It's not like I'm against vaginas. I'm very much pro vaginas and that. But because I mean, even after that situation happened, I mean, I've dated post-up girls, cis women and stuff, so it was all cool. It's just with her, when she did, because when we're talking, the dating period and stuff, yeah, it was built into the attraction. And so when she did go through the surgery, it just changed it. It changed the dynamic, and yeah, and the attraction just sort of fizzled away. I don't know if that's normal or if there's something I should have, if I had to do something better, I don't know.
Well, the difficult thing with attraction is, we talk a lot when it comes to attraction about examining your prejudices and kind of what your goals and interests are, and how those might be influenced by the way you were raised and things like that. But at the end of the day, if attraction fades, and it might be related to her getting bottom surgery. It might have nothing to do with that. it might be something to do completely with you or like some sort of insecurity that you have. It's really hard to say why exactly attraction faded for you in this particular moment. I will say I find it strange when this kind of stuff happens, mostly because it feels like, and maybe this is off base, I'm just going to tell you, coming from the trans perspective, what it feels like when men have a particular interest in me not getting bottom surgery. It kind of feels like you feel some sort of ownership of my body and some sort of expectation that like your sexual needs and interests are going to be met, and that by me doing what's right for my body and for my mind and what's best for my transition, that I'm somehow like taking away the sex that you thought you were going to get. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
And
I get that. I get
it's
that.
kind of like, why do you feel like her becoming the best version of herself is like an assault on the right to like the sex you wanted, you know? Like if you, I don't know. Some people only want a relationship for a certain kind of sex, and that's just all they're in it for. And I don't know if I really feel comfortable commenting on whether that's right or wrong. I think it's kind of arbitrary, but I don't know. Naomi, do you have more thoughts on that? I've rambled through a lot.
It's really complicated because there's a lot of factors going on, and I think this might relate on some level to more broader discourses about like people who are with a partner whose body experiences a lot of changes. I think that similar feelings might have come up in some like relationships that I've either experienced through friends or personally, where it's like one person transitions in the middle of the relationship and the other partner might have some complicated feelings about like how their body's going to change during that process, especially if they have kind of like a sexual orientation's very oriented in like one direction or the other. Or you can think about like other physical changes in a relationship, like say somebody going through pregnancy is going to have a lot of physical changes for their body. And, obviously I think that it's on you and your responsibility to like manage your own feelings about that. But it's good to be aware of those, and it's good to try to work through them and recognize like where this is coming from, trying to build kind of like broader awareness in yourself. I'm not sure I have any like particularly great resources for these kind of topics, but I think that looking at some more kind of like broader discourses about people that are, having challenging feelings or trying to work through complicated feelings about their partner's body physically changing a lot in the course of a relationship might be a good place to start.
Okay. I mean, I've had different experiences since then, which is, made me a bit more mature, a bit more aware of these sort of things and these sort of issues and sort of, but I guess for me, it just, I think back to that particular, situation, and it just eats me alive, man. I don't know. It just makes me feel really bad. Like, I'm like, why, how could I have handled that better? Because it wasn't like she was a bad person, she was still the same person, obviously. But, that's why I had to sort of, sort of assess why what was it, why did that lose a why was it specific to her? Because I dated girls who went through the surgery and who were post up, who also took me as well. So it wasn't like I had like a genital preference per se. It was just that with her, because when I started dating her, it was just built in. I just knew what I was sort of getting. So when she went through the change and stuff, yeah, it definitely did have an effect on my attraction. And I guess it probably, as she was saying, that it probably speaks to a broader issue about people, but your partner's body's changing while you're in a relationship and stuff. And of course, like, that's obviously a me issue. And I don't think I wasn't rude to her. I wasn't anything like that. I never said, don't do it. I never said that. It was just like, okay. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
I supported her. I went to the hospital. Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, if you're not trying to pressure her to not get the surgery and you are like acknowledging that, it's not I don't know, that it's not like has to do with her personally or anything like that. I think it's just an unfortunate situation where, you know, sometimes attractions change and people change and there's not really much that can be done or said about that. And I think, you know, it makes sense to maybe want to explore like the reasoning why it was such an issue for you in that particular instance. But really the big thing I think is if you're not trying to tell someone like, no, don't do it because I really want to like suck your dick or whatever, then I don't know if it really matters. Like,
yeah, I think,
yeah.
As kind of like a reassurance thing, I think it's good to make note of like the difference between behavior in a situation and like a feeling. Like we can have feelings that, you know, we might see as problematic or like unjustified like all the time, but you don't really have control over what feelings are going to arise in a situation. What you can control is your behavior, and, you know, being supportive of her and her medical decisions, you know, visiting her in hospital, and like being honest about, you know, what's going on. I think those are the best kind of things that you can do without any kind of pressure.
I guess
but then if you're talking about like, oh, sorry, go for it.
Yeah, because what I didn't do was, what I didn't do was be honest about it, about what was going through my head. I just kind of didn't talk about it, and it just, you know, just fizzled out. And I think that's where, you know, that's why it eats me alive, because, you know, she probably thought, well, you know, I don't know if she knew why it was that I stopped talking to her and stuff like that. But I think because a lot of cis guys who are trans attracted, probably, I don't know, I'm sure a lot of them probably wrestle with this feeling as well sometimes if they have an attraction, and it's also genital based, some of them, and that changes and how they process that as well and how they deal with that. And because I'm sure, I don't know, I don't think I'm the only one. So I was just wondering, and it seems like I shouldn't feel bad about it. Is that what you're telling me? Because I mean, this is years ago, it's 5-6 years ago, and I still feel
what
bad
I'm
about
trying
it.
to say is I don't think you should feel bad about like a feeling arising, but what you should assign like guilt or like motivation or purpose for is more like your behavior in a situation. So it's like, okay, I might have a complicated feeling, but what matters, how you should judge yourself is about what you do with that complicated feeling, how you act upon it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, this has happened. I mean, like, I don't do sex work anymore, but I did sex work for the last like 5 years. And when I announced that I was starting my fundraiser to get bottom surgery, I can't tell you how many of these dudes reached out to me and were like begging and pleading me not to get surgery because I don't know if they had some absolutely delusional fantasy that I was going to like enter their bedroom at night or whatever they wanted. I don't know. But like, it's weird when people ask you not to get gender affirming surgery. But if you didn't do that, then I don't think I really have a problem. If you just had feelings that changed and you think it's related to that, I think that's worth exploring for you. But if you don't know why, and it just is something that just fizzled out, that's just something that happens with relationships. You know, maybe you just weren't compatible people. Maybe like the way she was handling it was also maybe not phenomenal or something. I don't know the situation well enough to comment, but really at the end of the day, if you weren't pressuring her not to get it, and you weren't like trying to guilt trip her for doing it or for like changing your expectations or something like that, then I think, yeah, you definitely shouldn't feel guilty about it. And you should just kind of like take that as an experience. And if you're continuing to date trans women in the future, you know, use that as like a resource for if you come into a similar situation, be like, I've been on this path before. I don't need to make the same mistakes again. You know, I can have this conversation this time. And
Yeah, I think a big, you know, just I should touch on that. As you're saying that
Trick, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we just had your voice just got all super robotic on us, and we couldn't hear a single thing you said.
All right. I mean, we can go into the corner on this issue.
All right.
Thanks,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry there wasn't a more proper resolution, but definitely the audio is cutting out. So thank you for calling in. I'm glad we were able to get to like the core of the question while it was working. So thank you so much, Drake. We'll talk to you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Bye.
I hate that this web caller is doing this. It's for like 2 years solid. It was pretty good for international calls, but lately it's just been really terrible. I am gonna close the lines now. We have 4 callers on the line. If you are listening and you're on the line, don't go anywhere. We're gonna do our best to get to everyone who's still on the line. But that just means no new callers for the rest of the show. So, also, Naomi, I don't know if you have a time constraint. If we have...
No, I don't have like a super hard cutoff.
Okay, cool. I can't imagine it's gonna go super late. But if there's 4 callers plus super chats and like just to factor into your estimations. But up next, we have Louise, she, her, in Texas. I think I know who this is. Louise, you are live on the line. What's going on today? Hello?
Hello, me?
Yes, we're talking to you,
Hello.
Louise. Hi.
Good afternoon. This is Louise.
Hey, what do you want to talk about today?
Let me turn down the sound on the TV so there won't be interference here.
No worries.
Wait, where we go? Here we go. I've noticed there's a lot of new criticism of trans women by other trans women lately. Looks like a growing problem to me, and I've argued with some of these people online, like I've argued with actual trolls. It's probably a losing situation. For someone who's, I transitioned like 47 years ago, and I've been self for 40 years. But I think we should be, we should be more accepting of other people who don't exactly present the way we think is most proper. I'm from a time when there was only, everyone wanted to get the surgery, and there's no non-binary people, and when I reached out a few years ago, just before COVID, by the way, I live in 2 different places. It's like a condo unit in Lago Vista, which is near Austin, and another one in Galveston, like living in 2 motel rooms. I go back and forth. But anyway, I went to a group in Austin, and it seemed like almost everybody there, well, everybody's always, like 50 years younger than me, but everyone there was non-binary. And then I went to the one in Galveston, and everyone there was transmasculine, so I didn't really fit in either place. But I did see, there's variety, and we should be accepting of people and their variety, their diversity.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, as long as patriarchy's been a thing, which is a really long time, there have been women who attack other women in service of the patriarchy, and trans people are no exception to that. I think with trans people, I think there's a little bit of a extra motivation there, which is this fallacious belief that, maybe fallacious isn't the right word to use there technically, but it is an incorrect belief that by conforming to the patriarchal expectations and sort of pulling up the ladder behind you and attacking other trans people who don't meet those expectations, that you are going to enter the category of being one of the good ones, the holy category where the patriarchy loves you and accepts you for being trans. But the reality is, as far as the patriarchy is concerned, you are in the exact same bucket as every non-binary, queer, visibly queer person that you are attacking. And so I think it's definitely important to, do your best to be aware of the situation you're in, and to, I think rising tides lift all boats, I don't have to get it's actually kind of the heart of the poll today a little bit too. You know, I don't have to get the transmasculine experience or the non-binary experience to advocate for their right to be able to live their life unencumbered by prejudice, you know, to not be discriminated against in job searching or in housing or anything like that. Like, I don't have to understand their trans motivations to be like, you deserve to not be discriminated against. I think that should be like the default assumption for all people. And, you know, maybe there's certain situations where you can lose that right, but for the most part, it's the default assumption for me that they all deserve it.
When they put us in the death camps, some of us may go later than others, but we'll all go.
Yeah, there's actually, Kaylin Conrad did a video on the J.K. Rowling Nazi denialism, and they went into the discrepancies in how like Aryan queer people were treated versus like Jewish or non-Aryan queer people, and it was definitely different, but they were all persecuted and pretty harshly. So it's like, yeah, it's a mistake to think that by serving the like hegemonic force that you're going to be like one of them. But Naomi, do you want to jump in on this?
I think that you covered all the points of that I was thinking about. Yeah. I guess like one other kind of thing is, I think you talked about a little bit about, you know, trying to find like in-person trans groups or like social groups and sometimes having a hard time fitting in, especially as like a trans elder and maybe even as a trans femme. And I think that like, I've actually heard this as being a pretty common experience where like, especially as, you know, the queer umbrella has broadened out, sometimes it can be hard for people to like fit in some of these broader social groups. And I would absolutely encourage you, look into like creating a group of your own that would be tailored towards people who are more like you. I really haven't heard of any kind of like trans elder social groups. I think that'd be an amazing thing to exist.
I didn't have any problem with either group. I mean, I really don't fit in anywhere anyway. But I've been more in touch with cis people all my life because, you know, in the 1970s, there were not a lot of choices. And you know, as I say, I've been stealth for all these years. But that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate those who are on the lines fighting. And if it came right down to it, I might, you know, join the barricades. You never know. But I think that I think we just need to be more present in the world, and people have to know who we really are. You know, I say that as somebody who's cowering in the corner, but.
I wouldn't frame it as cowering, but I also like even when I was first coming into my transness back in like the 2010 or kind of that time frame, it was still kind of an expectation that trans women would be like cis normative and would go stealth eventually and just kind of like find a husband, white picket fence, and kind of like fade into the background. I mean, the queer culture was definitely booming as early as the 90s, and like people were, deconstructing those ideas, but I felt like still it was very prevalent to have the expectation of achieving passing, and was like the goal for a lot of trans women back then. And
and
I
I'm
don't think
so
it's
lucky that I passed, although, I know that's problematical, word for people, but
I think the thing that I try to do, and it's somewhere in between, I think, is that I am not going to hide that I'm trans. Like, if somebody comes up to me and asks me, I'll tell them I'm trans. I don't have a problem with that, but I don't tend to like broadcast it. And for me, the advantage in doing that is that people get to know me for me. And then when they find out that I'm trans and that I have no shame about it and that I'll tell them straight up, I find that that is a pretty effective tool at undermining a lot of their prejudice that they have about trans people. Now, granted, I am kind of an antisocial person and don't leave my house a lot, so it puts a wrench in my tool. But I go to like these reptile expos a lot, and there's a lot of conservative people there who know me. They like me. As far as I'm aware, most of them don't know I'm trans, but a couple of them do. And I just kind of am like, they'll find out when they find out. I'm not in a rush to tell them. I'm not in a rush to keep it a secret. It's like, I just kind of want them to realize that trans people exist around you. We're just trying to live our lives. You know, I'm not trying to like make everyone an activist. I just want the ability to do all the same things that you do and should like live my life and
the people I know, the people I hang out with are, you know, they're very liberal minded, and they probably wouldn't, you know, they probably wouldn't mind if they knew I was transgender. I sometimes I do things for different reasons than other people do things. Like, of course, broadcasting that you're transgender could be dangerous and socially, you know, a problem socially. But there was a time after my transition when I moved back to Texas that I let some people know freely what my situation was, and then a year or two later I decided, well, I'm just not going to, you know, say anything about it. I'm just trying to live a normal life and let people assume that I've had a normal life, which I did to a certain extent. And that was the reason, not as a matter of fact, you know, I was old enough to be drafted into the Army, the Vietnam era. And I wasn't afraid of being killed. I just didn't want to be in another male locker room, which is, I mean, it's really stupid kind of reasoning, but
I think it's pretty fair. I think especially from, you know, the time that you transitioned out, I think it's perfectly reasonable to want to be as cautious as possible with who, you know, you're around and who has that kind of information. So, yeah, I think that's
and
totally
at this
reasonable.
point, it probably doesn't matter as much as it did when I was younger.
Yeah. No, I definitely think nowadays, it's, especially since you're like close to Austin, like, I don't know, Matt and I went out for dinner yesterday, and we drove by the Out Youth Center, and I was like, oh, cool, I didn't know that they had this LGBT youth center here. And to be honest, I'm surprised there aren't like protesters who camp out in the parking lot to like rage about it.
Yeah, that's where I went to group meetings.
Yeah,
a few years ago.
And I was like, you know, Matt he often reminds me, like, hey, you know, I know we live in Texas, but this is Austin, and Austin is actually a pretty progressive city, and people here are pretty cool.
It really is.
And I don't know, I'm pretty loud about being trans, so I don't. I haven't had any problems with people in Texas, but also I'm white, so you know, that's also a moderating factor that might make my experience feel a lot more positive than other people's being in the South. But
this young trans woman got in touch with me, and she wants to do some kind of media thing, and I told her as long as I could kind of be a little discreet, I would love to help her with it. She's a PhD student at the University of Texas.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I look forward to working with her on that.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, Louise, I think we're gonna move on to get to the rest of these callers, but yeah, I'm definitely down with you.
Yeah.
No worries.
There are probably people with more important questions than I have.
No, it's totally okay. I'm totally down with you. We definitely need to be more generous to and more accepting of people that we don't necessarily understand their experience. You don't have to understand everyone's experience to extend kindness and gratitude to them.
That's right.
Cool. Thanks, Louise. We'll talk to you soon.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Alrighty. Moving right along, we've got 3 more callers. We're going to get to all of them today. But coming up next, we have James in New York. Pronouns are he, him. James, you are live on the line. What's going on? Are you there, James? Hello.
James.
You might want to check that you've muted your phone with your face, because I see you're not a web caller, so that shouldn't be the issue. But, oh, James hung up and disconnected. I'm sorry, James, I would open the lines for you, but since we're kind of at the end of the normal caller portion of the show, I'm just going to keep moving on. But you're welcome to call back next week or any other time. I'm sorry we didn't get to you after waiting. We've been working on getting a new call-in system for years, but the company that we were talking to has been in like permanent alpha status with their call-in program that they're working on. So yeah, it's not available and seems like it will never be, but maybe in the future. Up next, we've got Tree with Z-Zim pronouns. Chat, pronouns are going to be on the fucking screen, so please use the correct pronouns. In Colorado, Tree, you are live on the line. What's going on?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. It's a little tricky seeing your mouth move, but not hearing you.
Yeah, what's going on? What do you want to talk about today?
Okay, so I've been wanting to get my name legally changed for a while now. I have a name that's one of those more traditional gendered names, so people are able to tell right away what pronouns they think should go with it. But also, like, in Colorado, I have the option of changing my gender marker when I do the name change, and it looks like I get one freebie, which is kind of cool, and it also looks pretty less restrictive. Like, it doesn't look like I have to do any specific surgeries or anything. But my biggest thing going on right now is, like, in the medical system, like, I've been having a lot of problems with people using my dead name, even though, like I live in Colorado. It's not like they don't have a system that says preferred name, and I put it in there, and it should be used all the time. But, like, it's inconsistent. Like, the pharmacy portion says that there's federal laws that prohibit them from putting a nickname or anything on there, which I kind of think is bullshit, but I could be wrong. They didn't exactly give me a statute or anything. Sorry, excuse my French. Anyway, like, I'm struggling with the decision of getting my name change, and I don't know how much more acceptance I get from changing the gender marker, because, like, in the insurance system in the United States, they only do F or M. They don't recognize the X that is allowed in some jurisdictions. And, like, the other aspect of that is, like, I am a little afraid of having on my government documentation a marker that specifically marks me as queer. And just also being mad of, like, hey, like, you have a preferred name spot. Why is it so hard to integrate that everywhere? Like, because what if I was not in a position where I could change my name? Like, if I didn't have the funds or, like, whatever else was going on, like, it doesn't seem fair. And I kind of, like, I haven't been able to talk to anybody really about this. Like, I have a therapist and everything, but they're not in the queer experience, so they didn't have more insight. Like, they offered resources, and I kind of called on a whim because I was like, oh, wait, the caller that was on when I was in line had been talking about some of the stuff with, like, the disability versus LGBTQIA plus stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. I talked a lot last call, Naomi. You want to?
Yeah, so I think that on the kind of the first front, with, like, hospitals or their medical systems having trouble with preferred names, given that they have that's something in their system, that is absolutely something they should be respecting in every way that they can. And I know that most medical systems or hospitals will have, like, a specific, like, branch that deals with, like, them not following policy when it comes to, like, customer or patient experience. I know I've had to call that department for my local hospital dealing with like name change stuff, even after my legal name change, which was really frustrating. But if you're willing to put in that effort, you can absolutely make a difference in that kind of scenario by raising up a complaint through there. As far as like other kind of like legal name change difficulties or the kind of like the consideration of do I want to put an X or like is that going to out me? That's definitely a pretty tricky situation that only you can decide. Ultimately, it's going to come down to, you know, like whether or not you feel safe, whether or not you feel like represented and seen. And then the other thing that you mentioned was like having like a sex listed on your medical record. And I know that that one's kind of tricky. I think that it's used internally for a lot of like insurance related stuff and how they like bill certain procedures. And that one also even gets messy for like trans people. Regardless of if we decide to change or not, it's going to be messy in one direction or the other. And so I'm not sure there's too much you can do on that front. But on the name change front, if there's other kind of like considerations that you're thinking about, be happy to talk through those a little bit more. Yeah.
I was kind of thinking of basically protest switching the gender marker to the quote unquote opposite one from my assigned gender at birth to make it like I've had friends who have been told to go and take a pregnancy test when they don't have a uterus anymore.
Right.
And like I kind of want to highlight the ridiculousness of a situation like that.
Yeah. This is definitely something they can implement, and it's really frustrating because a lot of these medical facilities too will even ask you like, what is your preferred pronouns, or like, are you trans or something, but then will keep all of the other documentation and let that affect how they practice. It's been really frustrating. One of the medical facilities I go to here in Texas still has me listed as like male on a bunch of their stuff, but will ask me if I'm pregnant when I go in, and it's like, so really, what is the purpose of you having the incorrect stuff on this file? Like, if you wanted to say that I'm a trans woman or something so you could have that as medical information for whatever, that's fine. But like, yeah, I know that there are some efforts. I mean, Josie, who is joining the line full time shortly, she's, I know, like part of like the DNC's like informing them on like trans rights stuff, and I know that she's been pushing for a lot of positive changes in this, and I would like to think that, you know, assuming that we don't get a Trump presidency, that there will be a continuation of positive changes for trans people in that direction. But it is really a difficult thing. And I think, like Naomi said, it seems to be the case with medical facilities that it's like, you're screwed if you do, screwed if you don't, kind of, no matter what you do. It seems to be a problem for trans people. They are just kind of on the social disability model we were talking about earlier that you brought up, Tree. It's like, yeah, these systems are really just not built for trans people. No matter how gender conforming you might be, it's just a miserable mess all the way down. I think protests are good. I think, like Naomi said, talking to, you know, if there was like some sort of like HR sort of department you can call, that would probably be a good idea. But if you're just looking to like empathize, I definitely feel you there.
I guess I also have like feelings of guilt about not wanting to like have a government document with an attribute that I could be targeted for on there. Because I'm sure you could figure it out eventually to find all the trans people if somebody was a bad actor, but it's a little harder to sort through the trans binary people because you have like you're still within the social convention of having the M or F marker on the license. Hopefully the one that matches your gender identity. I just feel like a little guilt over having this choice to not have something on my documentation that would target me.
Seems you're concerned about safety. I don't think that it's fair to assign guilt to yourself for feeling unsafe or feeling like you want to do everything you can to ensure your safety. I mean, we're all just people trying to survive out there, and as trans people, especially within certain legislative contexts, that's getting a lot harder. So absolutely take care of your safety.
Absolutely. And like to extrapolate on that too, I know the Texas Attorney General, one of the ways that they've tried to identify people who are trans within the state was to look at everyone who has applied for a gender marker change at all in the state, which that could also apply to some cis people, by the way, because there are mistakes on birth certificates is a thing that happens. But like, I think really, if they really want to identify who the queer people are, I think they'll find a way, as you said. And I don't think this will be a limitation, but also if you feel safer doing it or not doing it, then that's totally, there's nothing to feel guilty about there. Doesn't like invalidate your queerness or anything like that. So there's no guilt to be had over that. I realize you can't just say that and then like magic away your guilt, but yeah, there's definitely no need for guilt, I don't think.
Okay. Well, this was nice and validating. It was fun reading. Like, I haven't been replying because I've mostly been trying to pay attention, but I'm liking everybody with like the whole grammar discussion of like, how do we use these? It was fun to see. And hi to everybody that said hi. I really like a couple of people had said to pick the marker closer to my gender identity if I don't feel safe with the X gender marker. And like, I like how fiercely everyone was like, be nice, and no one was mean.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. We've had people who, like, despite pronouns being on the screen, like, everyone in chat misgenders the person, and so I'm glad that people are in line. It's partially in thanks to our awesome moderators who bring the smackdown on people who misgender. So I wholeheartedly approve using the ban hammer when people get shitty, but it doesn't look like anyone's been that shitty, so I'm glad. We do our best to foster a good audience here.
Well, if anyone's ever interested in the discussion, like I do think, like, I think this is a longer conversation. I just kind of think that there's a little bit too much use of gender or sex markers on documentation in general. Like with the doctor stuff, it would be a lot more useful to be like, hey, has this person ever had a uterus? Yes or no. Do they currently have a uterus? Yes or no. Like, for medical stuff, especially like the system as it is really unfriendly to intersex people, and that's not even counting gender identity.
Yes. I'm so down with this tree. When Florida was doing their like revoking the ability to gender marker change licenses, that was like my big sticking point, was like, why do we need a gender marker on your license when it usually has like a picture and your weight and your eye color and your hair color at the time they took the picture? Like, it is literally something that is not needed at all in so many of the cases where we put it. So yeah, I'm totally with you. Like, it is just another example of how society is definitely not built for trans people, and there are so many things we could do away with and get more clarity on. If only we can stop stupid people from thinking that talking about uteruses is equating like cis women to just being uteruses, then this conversation will go so much smoother.
Or that
line's always crazy to me, because the whole point of using like anatomical language is to say that cis women are not just uteruses.
Right.
Yeah, like, and it's like that's not the point when we're talking about like reproductive rights and healthcare and stuff. Like it's funny to see, like there are usually turfs that'll like go so far back around with like, oh, how dare you ignore my womanhood? You're not thinking of me as a human, when they're specifically refuting language that identifies them as human.
Yeah. So
like why is it bad to be called a person?
Yeah,
I'm gonna be bold and say that I think that women are people.
So brave.
Yeah, go figure. Anyway, it was a pleasure talking with you. I'm gonna hang up because I'm pretty sure I have international calling. I'm hoping I didn't do an ADHD and real not. So we'll see. Bye.
Yeah, I hope
Thank you so much, Tree.
Thanks for calling, Tree. Appreciate it, and talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. All right, let's wrap up this caller portion of the show. We're going to power through with the last caller of the day. Azariah in Michigan, pronouns are he, him. Azariah, you are live on the line. What is going on?
Hello. I'm kind of sad that I'm your last caller because I imagine this is something you guys probably have a lot to say about. But I am a cis man who has had many. I've had relationships with both cis and trans people, great ones, bad ones. They're shitty people of all stripes, you know. But something I was curious about is that being a cis man who sort of like, also being bisexual, that's important to this, being somebody who's attracted to like many different shapes and sizes of people, it's easy to, I guess, fall into the like trappings of people seeing you as a chaser or somebody who like seeks out genderqueer or LGBT individuals when on dating sites or I don't know, even just talking to people, I guess. I'm somebody who is, I don't know, I should have thought more about how to phrase this before getting on.
Sorry.
Maybe this will help. Whenever I speak to somebody and I notice androgyny or like I can't pinpoint somebody's sexual characteristics or whatever, you can't assume someone's gender just by looking at them. It's something that I find very attractive. And many genderqueer people, by design, they come across that way. Some people prefer to lean more feminine mask or whatever, but you'll find a lot of people who sit somewhere neatly in the middle of there. And I really like that, but I also want to be a good ally and not come across as somebody who like fetishizes trans identities. So how could somebody, you know, balance those two things?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So, I mean, I'm not sure that there are like super clear guidelines or anything like that. A lot of it is going to be kind of like how you say things, not so much what you say, because like being attracted to a trans woman's body, for example, in and of itself doesn't make you like a chaser or fetishizing somebody's body, and can in a lot of ways be flattering and like the respectful way to engage in like expressing your attraction to somebody. But also there are certain ways that people go about expressing that can definitely make you feel more objectified and fetishized than like valued or like someone was interested in you. I think a lot of that has to do with sort of you being authentically interested in that person and not interested in like your idea of that person as it pertains to like as they might fit into some sort of like fetishized role. So like how to phrase this? It's kind of like somebody being attracted to me doesn't make me feel like they're fetishizing me. But if someone's like, oh, I would find it really hot for us to do this list of like sexual activities, that can kind of creep into the realm of sexualization, because it's like you didn't go on a date with me and then was like, hey, like what are you into? What makes you feel good? Like where are your boundaries? You didn't treat me like a person. You kind of came in with this expectation like, oh, the trans women I watch in porn do X, Y, and Z, and you're a trans woman, so I'm really excited to do X, Y, and Z with you. It's like the assumption that we're going to fulfill some sort of role or fantasy for you, and feeling like I could be kind of replaced by any trans woman for you, and that you would have the exact same interaction. That's kind of where it starts to feel more like fetishizing and not like I'm really being valued as an individual who you have like an attraction to me specifically, if that makes sense. But that also might be like kind of my arbitrary perspective on it. So I don't know if Naomi has a different take.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one, being like very behaviorally, intentionally, like focusing on having a good interpersonal connection is going to avoid things feeling like fetishizing or objectifying in general. Another thing that you might consider is how the language you use like comes off in terms of like how you're trying to express your sexuality. For example, I know that a lot of people who describe their attractions kind of similar to you might use the label like queer to describe their sexuality, or like they're queer bisexual, as a means of indicating that, you know, they really enjoy that kind of like ambiguous gender space, or even just like being around or dating other queer people who like really embrace that kind of queer label. So there are ways you can think about it like linguistically, and there are also like behaviors that are really good to emphasize in order to, you know, really show that your intentions are authentic and like show a healthy sexuality, not like an objectifying one.
Maybe it's probably because I didn't voice it well enough. I don't feel like most people who, well, probably a lot of people actually objectify trans people, but someone in my position, I don't feel like I objectify trans people. Obviously, you want to be close to somebody and actually care about them to be in a relationship with them. But somebody, you knowing that somebody is genderqueer or is LGBTQ or what have you, can be a more endearing quality. I think that's true for myself. I think probably other people in the chat or what have you probably have that experience as well. But I don't know if it's harmful to, as a cis man, feel like it's easier for me to be attracted to somebody with the experience of being trans, or somebody who presents themselves in a non-stereotypically masc or femme way, can be harmful or can be, I don't know, it can negatively affect my interaction with trans people.
I don't think it's harmful. I think you've just been a queer, and that's awesome, you know?
Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah, some people use the term pansexual to include trans spaces. I think that's silly. I don't see as any different from pan, but I guess, yeah, it's just part of being bisexual and being attracted to multiple different people.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I mean, everyone's really different too, you know? Like I think it seems like Naomi and I are kind of on the same page about this, and like I don't think anything you've expressed here really seems to be particularly objectionable to me, but also like I don't know, for some people maybe the fact that somebody identifies as, you know, cis and is attracted to queerness might feel like fetishizing to them, but I know plenty of people who are like attracted to people who are androgynous, or people who are queer presenting, and people who are like all sorts of different, like there's nothing in and of itself of being attracted to queerness or being attracted to androgyny or being attracted to like trans presentations that is objectionable. It's really about, kind of similar to the caller we took a couple calls ago, it's really about how you go about it and how you express that can really impact how people are going to receive it, you know? Like but if the question is just, is there anything wrong with it in and of itself, then no, I don't think there is. But I think the concerns are always really the delivery and how it's expressed.
Okay, well, this is definitely something that I would talk to trans people who I'm in relationships with in the future as well, you know, making sure that they're comfortable with something that's comfortable with the cis person who feels sort of way. Everybody's different. I don't expect you guys to. I just wanted to know your opinion on it.
Sure.
Thank you very much for answering my question.
I think it's also totally acceptable to, like, if you find someone attractive, be like, you know, and you ask them out on a date or something, to be like, hey, I really like you and I'm really attracted to you, but I want to know how best to, like, express that to you and make you feel, like, validated and seen by that and not, like, objectified or whatever. Because I don't know. I think it's totally okay to have those conversations, like, very openly and upfront. I think most people do tend to just kind of fall into assumptions, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but I think communication is always better, you know? Being upfront and direct is always going to help everyone feel more seen and everyone feel more respected and everyone feel less gross about the situation. So, yeah, hammer in on that communication. But thanks, Azariah. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Azariah feels like a very biblical name. I appreciate it.
It does.
All right, so we are going to move on to the caller portion of the super chat portion of the show. We just concluded the caller portion of the show. So if you have a super chat of $5 or more, we will read it live on air, coming right up in this next section. I do want to do the weekend shows really quick one more time, just so if y'all missed at the beginning, you can hear this now. This Sunday at 2 p.m. Central Time will be Jimmy and Matt on the Sunday show. If you like to debate God or religion or supernatural beliefs, that's a great place to do that. Skeptic on Monday will be with Erika Gibbon. So if you have any like biology or evolution or anthropology sort of questions, she's your gal. She will be ready to take on all those questions, I'm sure. On Chewed Gum on Tuesday at 6 p.m., we've got Eve Was Framed and Alyssa, the OG Chewed Gum team, talking about patriarchy and purity culture. And then next Wednesday on the Hang Up, it'll be Matt and Jimmy. I'm sure they'll be looking to do political conversations on that episode. And then next Thursday, back here on Takis, it'll be myself and Dr. Ben at 5 p.m. Central Time, so 3 hours after the normal start time. But with that, let's get on to these super chats. Oops, I went to the poll. There we go. I'll start at $5 from Charlotte. Hey, I have to confess, I had fun watching Dun Dun Dun, a different show. Jimmy and Forrest got all my money last night, but Takis is still number one. Clearly not all your money.
We have another $5 from Charlotte. Hashtag Team Naomi this week. Woo, let's go.
Starting off strong. We have $9.99 from Seven Lions. I called last week about my kid coming out as trans. Arden's advice was spot on. His mom just needed time to process. She's doing much better now with his new pronouns. Thank you for everything. Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, you know, it's even to the most accepting people, I think sometimes when it hits a little closer to home, it's just a little bit more difficult to process. So I'm glad that she's coming around and that I hope you all have a nice, happy little family together. Most queer-ass family I've ever seen, and I love it.
We have 20 from Jacques Greenland. Good news yesterday when the idiot teacher in Swindon that was actively misgendering a student lost their tribunal after being fired. Was happy to see that other students had complained to support their friend. Hashtag Team Arden.
I think I might have passively seen this. So somebody who misgendered a student got like fired or something and tried to appeal and it failed. That's what it sounds like.
I believe there was a lawsuit that happened because of it, and he lost the lawsuit is what came out recently, which was good to see.
Yeah, let's go. Especially, that was in the UK, correct? So that's even more helpful,
yes, I believe so.
Considering how much they tend to rule on a middle ground position. $4.99 from Sexton Hardcastle. Love you both. I'm interested in dating trans people. How can I make sure I don't come across as someone who's merely fetishizing them? Wow, we're getting a lot of trans dating questions today. I think we've kind of covered this quite extensively today, so maybe go back and check out those calls. But you probably sent this before we did those, so hopefully you felt like your question was already answered.
We have 5 from Leigh Watts. I'll be seeing my daughter for the first time in years at my sister's 17th. Super excited and would appreciate a mention from you guys. Hey, well, congratulations.
Yeah, congrats. Your sister's 17th. It's like her birthday, I guess. Well, I'm so glad you get to see your daughter. Hope it goes well. We've got $4.99 from Poor Claire. Hashtag Team Arden. Thank you, Claire. I appreciate it.
We have $10 from Mike B. I guess I deconstructed my gender identity. I wondered if the feelings I got at seeing my receding hairline counted as gender dysphoria. Probably, but I'm still cisgender. I just wish I had more hair. Yeah, I absolutely think that you can think about those kind of feelings as a type of gender dysphoria and relate to trans people on kind of like an empathetic level about that. And I think that can help people kind of understand like gender affirming care for a trans person from a trans perspective a little bit better. They kind of think about how they might relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got $9.99 from Louise Richardson. I enjoyed the call. Thanks. I enjoyed the call talking to you, Louise. I appreciate it. It's always so interesting to me, trans people who went through transition in that time period. Like, you know, it's a really common conservative talking point that like, oh, all this transgender stuff that started in 2015. And it's like, no, trans healthcare has been like an active area of study for like nearly a century now. And yeah, it's cool to be reminded that those people exist.
We have 25 PLN from Dorota. I'm going to try my best. Kadluboska. Hey, gals. Happy to be able to hear you live. Hashtag, I'll hear you live. Hearing you live is also good. Hashtag Team Martin.
I do like living. Living's good. Let me double check that there are no other super chats that I missed, because I think that was all of them. Yes, got that. Yep. All right. I think we did it. So that was the last super chat of the day. I'm sure someone will make me a liar shortly, but thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to our mods for keeping chat respectful. I did not look at chat as much as usual. Oh, I see Matt. Hi. How you doing? And I know I saw people getting banned, but I wasn't really paying attention. So if you were doing hard work banning trolls, good luck. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate you guys keeping chat so respectful. Thank you to Jess for screening the calls today. Thank you to everyone who called in. And thank you, Naomi, for being here. I appreciate it. I gave you like kind of 2 or 3 days notice. I appreciate you being able to make it happen.
Yeah, always appreciate being able to come on.
Definitely go check out Naomi's stuff. We'll get her links should have been in the description before. If they aren't, I will get them in right after we wrap up. That way, if y'all want to go see any of Naomi's stuff, you can just click that link there. So hang around and refresh. That way you can get access to that. But until then, we will see you all next week with myself and Ben. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, I was wondering where that song was. There we go. If you want to get your name on this patron scrolling list, go to patreon.com/calltheline. It is the best way by far to support the line. Thank you, guys. See you next week.